Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today is bits and bobs really. Probably won't be too long. What do you mean you've heard that before? Firstly, today is the 8th. Yeah, it's also Sunday. Yeah, well, I can't do two things. Well, I could. I even thought about it. But my regular Everything in Bloom on the 8th is going to be tomorrow on the 9th. That's happened before. I'm sure it'll happen again. I did think about doing Everything in Bloom on the 8th as my Sunday chat, but then I'd have to think up something else to do tomorrow, wouldn't I? So I'm being selfish. So Everything in Bloom will be tomorrow. Obviously yesterday, Wessex Orchid Society Show, and I don't know how it stuck in my mind this morning, but I've been a member of the Bournemouth Orchid Society a long time in comparison to Wessex. So you'd think in theory I would know a lot more people at Bournemouth a lot better and be friendlier with them. And it dawned on me that I have a much friendlier time when I go to the Wessex show. And I don't know how that's happened, it just does. But I feel mates with quite a few people at Wessex. Now, several of those people are actually joint members and go to Bournemouth as well, but obviously they're the same people, you know, that doesn't change. But yeah, I don't know how that's happened or how it works like that. I mean, I'm actually on the committee with the Wessex Orchid Society now, just an ordinary committee member, no special duties, apart from looking after the laptop, which will hardly ever get used, but when it's needed, it needs to be kept up to date, and all that sort of stuff, and available, obviously, not left at home. So I do have to take it every time. And I'm probably going to be on the committee at Bournemouth, but I have to be elected, so somebody has to propose me and somebody has to second me. And since I've been at Bournemouth, no committee members have ever changed. So when we get to the AGM and people are voted onto the committee and the chairman is voted in and everything, it's the same people over and over again. So those meetings go incredibly quickly because there's not much to do. I mean, they even elect them en masse, like, right, all these people are prepared to stand again, so who would like to propose all of them? And it just goes through. But this time, there are people leaving the committee. So people are standing down, so posts are available. So I'm going to go for one of those, mainly because of my, the Orchid Society's magazine I'm responsible for has an interaction with some of the things that go on the committee, and it would be better if I was there and actually heard it and could make a voice if I thought it could affect the magazine, because the magazine's important to the society. So there we go. So we'll see if that takes place or not. See if I can bully somebody into proposing me and then seconding me. But because nobody's been elected that way since I've been there, somebody's got to try and find the forms and actually dig out the procedure, because they've never been needed since I've been there. Literally nobody's ever had to propose and second a new member. Yeah, the members are already there, so I presume I've got to fill in a form and get two people to sign it. I don't know, I'm sure I'll find out. So that's that. But the show yesterday was, personally I thought it was a bit thin on the ground on the competitive tables. The separate display was very nice, and what was even better, I didn't say that, was my friend Brian's actual separate display. He's one of the good growers, also a joint member, but at the Wessex Orchid Society shows he's allowed to put up his own separate stand with his own plants on, which you'll see on video when I get round to doing those. I filmed the competitive tables, filmed the display, and I filmed Brian's display as well, and they will be put up on YouTube when I get round to it. And if Everything in Bloom on the 8th is going up tomorrow, what I might do with those three elements is actually load them separately. So actually, you know, this is Wessex Orchid Society competitive tables, separate video, this is the display, separate video for my friend's separate display. That will make three much shorter videos. And while we're on the subject of show videos, normally you just get some music, and it's quite easy to select a piece of music for a short video. But as the videos get longer, the number of pieces of music available in one hit gets very thin on the ground. And for the Bournemouth Orchid Society, I tried something new. I tried sort of talking through the plants, so I added a soundtrack afterwards. The soundtrack at the time of filming is not good, because you've got people mumbling away in the background, people calling out, kids screaming, dogs barking, you know, lorries going past, all the hubbub of what goes on. Plus, when I'm filming, I'm often talking to people. I chat while I'm filming because I know I'm going to erase the soundtrack, so what I say doesn't matter. That's why I don't use the soundtrack from the actual show, because it's just a jumble of noise, and to me it's distracting. I'm not too keen on it. So I normally just put a piece of music. And last time I tried putting a piece of music and talking through the plants as well. And I like the idea, but when I did it last time, the balance between my voice and the music wasn't right, and the music was a bit too loud. So people were having difficulty concentrating on what I was actually saying because the music was, and also that piece of music had peaks and troughs in the volume built in. I didn't do that, obviously, that's how it was recorded. So yes, I like the idea, but if I do it that way again, I would need a piece of music at a much lower volume so that it really was just in the background and not sort of almost at the same level of the voice. So I'll see about that. And so that's the show, videos to come. And a good friend at Wessex, now although I would have been really pleased to see him, and had he been coming along to the show I had a plant for him, but he actually sent me a message on Facebook saying he's not going to come. The reason being he's been back to his home country, Slovakia, and he flew back to the UK via Luton Airport. And with all what's going on around the world, he didn't want to risk going through a major transmission area, i.e. an airport, and then coming to a show with crowds of people. So he decided not to come and keep himself at home for a bit. So good on you, Milan, but we missed you. Seriously, lots of people said, where's Milan? Some people said, where's Milan's plants? So it shows how important you are, they just want your plants. Anyway, so that's the show out the way. Can you go to an orchid show and not buy any plants? Well, yes. I came home from the Bournemouth show with no plants, so it can be done. Did I manage it again yesterday? Did I hell? Right, I want to show you something first of all. Now, this is not my plant. This was a gift, and it's not a gift for me, it's a gift for Hannah. Now, I'll say straight away, Hannah loves white Phalaenopsis because they fit in with the decor in the flat that she lives in. And she's got some nice decorative pots that also fit in with the decor. But yeah, Peter White gave me this from Orchid Accessories for Hannah. Because many people asked where she was, not there sort of thing, and I said, well, literally she had her stitches out on Friday, and the thought of being bounced up and down in a car on a long journey did not appeal to her. So she's not down this weekend, she's coming down next weekend instead, which meant I could go to the show. So that was done. Now this is a, I don't know whether you'll be able to see it properly, let's see how close I can get. Now this is a Phalaenopsis, but look at the lip. That is not your normal Phalaenopsis. And I believe these types of Phalaenopsis have been nicknamed big lips, because if you look at the shape of the lip, it is not normal by any means. It hasn't got that, like what I call a snake's tongue, the sort of forked bit that sticks out. So quite different. And I hate to have to say this, but I find them quite attractive, or I find this one quite attractive. It's white with delicate tinges of pink, which the camera might not even pick up, but it's very attractive, and the lip's got some lovely spotting on it. I like it, and it's got 4 spikes on it. Now normally when you find a Phalaenopsis with 4 spikes, you look closely at the plant in the pot and it's actually 2 plants. But this is a single plant. It's got a good root system. Yeah? So that can stay in its pot for a bit. Just have a feel of the media itself. It feels quite firm. Some of those roots have got active growing tips on them. So it can stay in the pot for a bit, at least until it's finished flowering anyway. So that's for Hannah. She will be very pleased because she's got a collection of Phalaenopsis, mainly the smaller ones, but none of her white Phalaenopsis actually bloomed this winter or spring, or haven't done yet. So she'll be pleased to have a white one with a touch of pink. So that's that one. So that's not mine. And thank you very much, Peter. Very, very thoughtful gift. But we have a bag with Roger written on it, because if I buy a plant at a show, I always say, right, I'll pay for it, but you can keep it till I go home, otherwise you've got to walk around with it all the time, haven't you? And I love it when a trader writes your name on the bag and doesn't have to ask. So, what have we got then? What have we got? We did buy this, actually. How well wrapped is this? Have we got the sellotape? Yes, we have. Luckily it's tissue paper, so the sellotape doesn't last long, does it? This is an unwrapping video, not an unboxing video. And what have we got? What we've got is a replacement. I did say if I see one, I will get another one. Now this plant is nowhere near as big as the one I had. It isn't. You know, this is a smaller plant. Looking at it, it has got some new growths pushing on. Sort of one here, another one round here that doesn't look too happy. Another one here. Something white on it that is not bugs. We won't worry about that then. So it is in growth mode. It is growing, some of the canes, and even some of the larger ones like this one. It is actually in growth. It hasn't finished growing. There's still a leaf to come out. And I didn't notice this until later, but it has actually got a bloom on it. One solitary bloom. Well, that's very unusual for hibiki, as you know, because it's a cluster bloomer. It puts them out in clusters. But it's not a bad plant, and much to the trader's annoyance, right in front of them I did that. And we do have a good root system there. It's in that cocoa fibre-y stuff, which it will come out of in the not too distant future. But yeah, so it's a replacement. So as I said, it's nowhere near as large as the last one I had, but I had a good look over the leaves and there's no sign of any fungus like the last one went down with. I do have one black mark on one leaf. That's coming off, just in case it's harbouring anything. And on that subject, again, when I go to Wessex, there are several people who I will have a good chat with. One gets singled out because of the plants that he grows, how well he grows them, and what's behind it up here. This is what I like to get at. And he sent me some pictures of a dendrobium. He doesn't grow dendrobiums, literally, but he had one. I don't know whether he's still got it. And it got that fungus the same as my hibiki did. All the black marks and pitting on the leaves and new growths failing and stuff. And he sent me some pictures to say this looks exactly the same as your hibiki, and agreed. So it was the same thing. And he wanted to talk to me. He said, I need to talk to you about fungicide. And what he said made sense. Why the hell I didn't really think that through, I don't know. But if you've got a plant that's being damaged by fungus, yeah, it's getting, the surface cells are getting eaten away and destroyed, and they can then get infected. So all this is going on and ruining the look of your plant. And if left unattended, it's probably going to kill it. So, you know, it needs dealing with. So what's going to happen when you put your fungicide on it? It's going to kill the fungus with any luck, isn't it? Is that going to make your plant look better? No. What's it more likely to do? it's more likely to make it look worse, isn't it? Because you've not only now got the bits of the plant that were being attacked, but they're going to carry on because the cells have been destroyed. So you may have killed the fungus to stop it doing any more damage, but it takes time to get from the point where the cells are starting to be destroyed, where they still look like a normal leaf, and the time that they have been destroyed and infection gets in there and turns them black and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to get worse after it's been sprayed. You may have done the job, but it's going to get worse. And at that point, when mine was getting worse, I threw it out. You need to wait for new growths and see if it comes up clean. Yeah, which I think mine would have done. But why mine went in the bin was it was an easily replaced plant, one, and two, how long would it have taken for new growths to have replaced those old ones and the manky leaves? Years. So to get that back to a nice looking plant was years. Whereas now, you pay a little bit of money and get a shiny new one. Albeit smaller, it'll grow. All I've got to do with this is decide, do I try it in a pot this time? Or do I mount it again? It did look nice mounted, I must admit. We shall see. Decision still to be made. Right, so that's everything to do with the show. We've done everything in bloom in the 8th. Right, a thought. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I am actually going to do an element of it right now, because I need to water my holy clay pots. And chatting to my friend Brian, he said about why do I pot my cattleyas this way. That was one I can get at. Preferably one that's got some blooms to look at. Right, now I said the reason I pot my cattleyas like this is it's large bark, so it's going to dry quickly. The holes in the clay pot help it dry quickly and don't get a soggy bottom. And in addition, the holes in the pot serve another purpose. I can see into the pot. So we all know that the surface of a pot after watering is going to be the first thing to dry, and it can be rapid. Within half a day that surface looks dry, but down here is still soaking wet. Well, if that was a normal clay pot, I wouldn't know how wet, and I wouldn't know at what point it had dried out. And with a cattleya type, I need to know it's dried out before it gets any more water. It needs that wet dry cycle. So that was my logic for going down this road. Plus I found via Rachel in Ireland a place that was selling these ready-made with the holes already in them in 2 sizes, pretty damn cheap, because despite having to pay for the pots, I had to pay, Rachel had to organise a courier because of the weight to get them from Ireland to the UK. The cost of that, all that added up together, I still paid less than £3 a pot, ready to go. So that's why I got these. I've never found any as cheap since either, but I've got some spares now. Anyway, so that's the logic, and as I said, these are all dry at the moment, they all need watering. We got on to talking about feeding and revisited the importance of calcium. I said, well, I use I've got CalMag, which I use now and again, but I've also got the calcium nitrate. And my friend looked up with something that I'm not sure I would ever do, but I like the concept and I like the logic. He uses calcium nitrate about once a month at appropriate times a year. I doubt if this gets done in December, but at appropriate times of year he uses calcium nitrate at the same strength that he uses his feed, and he uses it on its own. I said, why don't you add it to feed and do like half and half or something? He said, no, it goes in on its own because it's calcium. And plants absorb calcium best at a high pH. But at that pH, quite a few of the other nutrients don't get absorbed very well, if at all. That's why he puts it in separate. Sound logic. I'm not so sure about the strength. But I do have a look at all the plants on his display and think, yeah, some it's working pretty good. So my holy clay pots were due a flush today, so they're actually going to get a calcium nitrate. I can't call it a flush, it's a feed. But I'm going to bump that up at a stronger strength than I would normally do. I'm not going to bump it right up to my normal feed level, but I am going to put it in on its own so that I can put it in at a pH higher than I would normally do. It makes sense. You can only use one pH at a time, and we all know that it's recommended somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5. Now I don't go down to 5.5 ever. The lowest I go down to is about 5.8. That's my low point. My high point with my normal feed is about 6.5. But occasionally I'll go up to 6.7 or maybe even 6.8. And the reason being that some of the nutrients go in better at that higher pH, and the moss on the mounts and some of the moss in the pots is going to reduce that pH relatively quickly. While the pot's still wet and while the plant roots are still feeding, the pH drops naturally. So you go in a bit high and the pot will do its job, or the mount will do its job, and lower it. So providing it doesn't dry out before that happens, you get a bit of a range of a pH. Now it doesn't happen so good on mounts because they dry so quickly, but it certainly does in pots. So a quick thing about pH, and I've got a question that I was going to do now, but I'm going to move it to the Q's and A's because it's a more general thing. So we'll cover that on Thursday, providing I remember. Where have you just come off of? It's just perched on the top of the cane. Anyway, right, so that's it for today really, but I'll still maintain that if you gather all the growers together that you can find and stick them in a room and ask them all individually how they feed their orchids, every single one of them will give you a different answer. And I don't believe that's ever going to change. Now some of them do it their way and they've evolved that or stuck to the same way for nearly as long as I've been alive. Can you knock that? Probably not, because their plants are still going well. That's the test as far as I'm concerned. If somebody's got this novel way of feeding and you have a look at their plants and you think, God, I've seen better than that, then maybe their way is not as good. But to me, the proof's in the pudding. It's the plants. Do those plants look fighting fit? Proper colour, proper size, everything like that. Good amount of blooming, depth of colour. Yeah? And if all that is true, then however they're feeding is working pretty good. So, you know, when you talk to people that have plants that look like that, and they say what they do, you come home and you think about what you do, and you think, oh, I do the same as that, I do the same as that, oh, I do that differently. Is it worth having a go at trying it a slightly different way? I always say, don't do a mad change. Don't do everything all at once with the whole collection. But yeah, I'm going to try. Quite honestly, I often put the calcium nitrate, well, let's put it this way, I always use CalMag on its own. I don't mix that, but I don't use the sort of dosage that I was talking about yesterday. The calcium nitrate and the magnesium sulfate I don't mix, but I usually add them in on top of feed. So my way is to sort of think, right, today this set of orchids are going to get watered, and because of what they are, they're going to get, what, 200 parts per million. But today I want to add some extra calcium in, so I want to add some calcium nitrate. How much of that do I want? Well, I don't know, about 30, 40 parts per million, just a little bit of a kick. So I then come down from my 200 to about 160, 170 for my normal feed, then put the calcium nitrate on top to get to the 200 that I originally wanted. Yeah? Because if you do it afterwards, you put your feed into 200 and then you're up near 250 once you've added the other in. Those are arbitrary figures. Those are, for example, I know for a fact that the chap I'm talking about feeds at heading up near 3 times as strong as some of my feeds, but I vary my feed levels too. I don't feed at the same level. I'll have a higher feed one time and the next time a lower feed with perhaps an additive. So I'm not consistent. They get a varied diet. You know, you might love cheese on toast with beans, but do you want it at every meal? So I do vary mine a bit. There was something else on feeding as well. Oh yes, time of year stuff. Now we all know that in the UK we got lousy winters, really short days, and those days have got poor light quality within those short hours. So if you exclude artificial lighting, in the UK nothing much is going to happen in the winter. Stuff stops growing. It just hasn't got enough light to trigger it into growth before it starts getting dark again. So you've got a period where stuff's not happening. What's the point in feeding at that time? So chatting to my friend, in total agreement. But then he said, but don't forget, and this is something I know and I've talked about it, our orchids, generally speaking, average around, the closer to the equator, 12 hours a day. And it varies around those tropics from 11 hours or just under to just over 13. And that's it. That is their day length range that they get year in, year out. It doesn't vary. So in our summer, when we're heading up 15, 16 hours of our best light, in theory, we're stressing our orchids. And you saw the result of that in my grow room last year. All my oncidium leaves went pale, which was pointed out by the person in question, in no uncertain terms. And it was right, so we'll do something about that this year. But yeah, so we're putting undue stress on the plants in as much as they're supposed to do their growing in that 12 to 13 hour slot. Well, what are they going to do with the other 3 or 4 hours? Because if they carry on growing, they're exhausting themselves. So how can we deal with that? Well, first of all, possibly a little bit of extra shading through those peak light periods. What about feed? What are the orchids going to do under those circumstances? Now you might think they're going to grow better because they've got more daylight. It's actually the opposite. And from practical experience over many, many years, a lot more than I've got, it has been deemed that it's better not to feed them during those stressful months and let them rest and not exhaust themselves. So January, December time, little or no feed. And what about July as well? And my friend doesn't feed in July either, heading into August. So our longest day, towards the end of June, 20 something. So, you know, not long after that, feed comes right down because the plants are getting too much light. It's not so much the strength of the light, it's the length of time they're in it. Yeah, so he cuts back the feed during those really lengthy days when the sun's at its brightest. Because I mean, if you think about it, the days are just as long in May and the first part of June as they are in July and the first part of August. But the sun tends to be not as strong during May. You've only just got out the end of spring. So it's not just the longest day, it's the intensity of the light. We tend to get our better weather July, August, sometimes on into September if we're lucky. So, or not, depends how you think about it. So it's worth thinking about what others have evolved over time and the logic behind it. If the logic makes no sense to you, then don't take any notice of it. As I said, we all feed and water differently. But when somebody talks to me who, as far as I'm concerned, knows what they're on about and based on practical experience over donkey's years, I'll at least listen and then I'll analyse. I'll put a bit of that in, what little bit there is, and come up with, we'll have a go at a bit of that then, or not. Well, in this case I will. So we will try the calcium nitrate on its own as a feed, not a little supplement tweaking the values on top of what would already be there, but as something a bit more substantial, every so often. Period undecided, but my friend does it once a month during the growing periods, when stuff's growing. No point chucking that stuff in there if the plants are static and not moving. No, it won't get used. So, but the one thing I'm reasonably confident on, with some backup, is it's almost impossible to overdose calcium. The plant will take in and use what it needs, and then it will stop. Because there comes a point where there's no place for any more calcium to go. Bearing in mind it's a non-mobile ingredient, nutrient, yeah? So if you imagined it like a tall glass, and it's starting to fill up at the bottom via the roots, yeah? And all the nutrients are in there, and as it's filling up, we'll have a bit of calcium in there, a bit in there, a bit in there, and a bit in there, and then when it gets to here, although there might still be some of the other nutrients left, it's used all its calcium, and it's still got to get up to here. So there's some parts of the plant didn't get any this go round. It's got to wait till the next chance when it comes in at the bottom and says, right, we'll have, oh, we don't need any there, we've already got some, we don't need any there. Now we can get to those other bits. Non-mobile. Once it's placed, it's frozen. So that's worth thinking about as well. Enough needs to get in there to be able to be distributed to every bit of the plant that needs some. And if it doesn't need it, it won't get used. So I don't think you can overdose on that. And you've got no dramatic effect on other nutrients from it being there, whereas some of the others you have. You get too much magnesium or too much NPK or even too much P, it'll imbalance and it'll start infecting other stuff. And certainly if magnesium builds up and gets to a higher level than it should be, it's out of balance, other stuff stops working or doesn't work as well. It has an adverse effect by giving your plant too much. So go steady when you're mucking about with balance and the different levels of the different ingredients. Unless you know what you're doing. And even when you know what you're doing, it can still go wrong. Different plants will use different amounts of different nutrients depending on how vigorous they are and various other factors, some of which are not even known. So, you know. Right, that'll do. That's enough waffle. I always test how long I've been going by is my coffee still cold or hot? Lukewarm, so obviously the video is more than long enough. So everything in bloom tomorrow, and I'll get the show videos put together. Now I spent most of this morning, because I got woken up quite early, messing with the new laptop. My plan is effectively to phase out my desktop, because although don't get me wrong, it's a good computer with the large screen so I can sit and watch films and stuff like that. The beauty of the desktop is it's got a proper 5.1 sound card which I put in it. So if I play I can stick a DVD in the slot and watch a film on a decent quality screen with surround sound, proper, not pretend, because you can get 5.1 sound systems that are electronically split. They've started off with one source of sound and put different frequencies into different corners. That's not the true thing. But on my laptop I haven't got a sound system. Effectively I've got two speakers about that big, I expect, so I've got stereo, but that's as good as it gets. And they're tinny. There's no depth to them because there's no size. It can't be done. But what you can get is a gadget which allows you to take your headphone source, which is a stereo source, and electronically turn it into theatre sound. So it's not true theatre sound, but it'll be a flipping sight better than what I've got on the laptop at the moment. That allows me to just plug the laptop into my surround sound speakers and drive those. And that's the only bit that's stopping me doing it, is just making sure that bit's going to work. The laptop, I can just disconnect my big screen, plug it into the laptop, and it fires up. And because the laptop is so much better quality, it's actually a better picture on the same screen as my desktop, using the laptop to drive it. because it's got the quality coming down the wire basically. God, the wind's getting up again. So I'm thinking of effectively using the laptop for everything. So first job, obviously I've got to have all the software I need on the laptop, and that's what I did this morning. So I've either reinstalled or reacquired. So yeah, that's about the best way to say how I get some of it acquired. So the laptop's now got all the software I need on it. I've then got to get all my data and my files and stuff across, which I just use. I've got a external hard drive, you know, a little USB thing. So I load it up on that, on the desktop, plug it into the laptop and unload it. So relatively easy job. I can't be bothered with mucking about trying to set up shared files between the two. So no, I'm not doing that. And the desktop hasn't got Wi-Fi. You know, airwave Wi-Fi. You can't connect to the internet on the desktop without a wire. So I've still got to join the two together. So that's what I've been doing. And then I think I'll use the laptop on the grounds that it's so fast and so good. And I paid quite a lot of money for it. It seems silly to have it sitting there not being used day after day and only use it for certain things. So I'm planning on using it for everything. And then obviously one of its purposes was to do the live broadcast. All I've got to do is pull the plugs out and walk in here with it and turn it on. So that's the process. It'll take a few days, just a bit now and then, until one particular day I'll get the last thing across onto the laptop, and then it will be identical to the desktop, and then I can unplug everything out of the desktop and plug it into the laptop and not bother turning the desktop on again. The laptop will use an awful lot less energy as well. You know, it can run off the battery a lot of the time without even being plugged in. So we're working on that as well. And yeah, I'll get the show videos done. As I say, it'll either be 2 or 3, but I'm thinking of keeping them a lot shorter. I was watching a few show videos this morning. That's what's put this idea in my head. And if they go on too long, you start, or I start getting bored, despite the fact down the line might be some absolutely stunning orchids. But when you're looking at show quality orchids, you're looking at one good one after another. And nothing to distract you, like, you know, oh, I'm having a bit of trouble with this one. Oh, this one's got lousy roots. None of that's going on. They're all good plants. It's just one after the other. And I think if they go on too long, they're a bit, your interest level tails off, quite honestly. So I think doing some shorter ones might be a better idea. I'm sure people will let me know, as you do, and thanks for that. Right, I'll see you next time. Enough waffling. What was the expression that guy used? Waffle master. Cheek. See you next time. Bye for now.